We're so pleased today to welcome in Brandon Etheridge, who's the Director of Multimedia Services at Auburn University College of Liberal Arts. Brandon, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Gene.
By way of intro, I'll just offer up a little bit here and then please take it and roll with it from there. Brandon was a student at Auburn University, and while still a student, actually performed as a reporter for a television station in this market. So he had practical on-the-job experience while he was still in school. And then as he graduated and contemplated what he would be doing moving forward, he pivoted. And many people in our industry pivot at various times in their career. And Brandon has parlayed that into an incredibly successful gig with his alma mater. And so he's going to talk to us about how the nexus of the skills you learn as a journalist, the skills you learn in media, can really offer up a wide array of opportunities to you in journalism, in television, in radio, in print, in web, in digital and social, but also in a lot of other fields that maybe you haven't even thought of before. So Brandon, welcome in this morning. We really appreciate you sharing your time, your journey, and your expertise with us.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gene. I appreciate it. And yeah, you're spot on. I did work with another news station there in Columbus. I don't know if you know this, Gene. I actually started at an X-Star station in Dothan. So I started at WDHN. My summer after my freshman year. They were crazy enough to put me on air and let me do some things when I was interning, and kind of how I ended up getting the gig in Columbus. But yeah, I will say, as I've thought about chatting with y'all today, the thing that kind of made me laugh was this is I went back and watched some of the other speakers y'all have seen, and I wish I would have seen Gene's presentation about how to get a job in TV when I was going through school, because it's awesome.
That's generous of you. Thank you.
But this is the presentation I would have tuned out, because I was like, nah, I'm going to do this forever. TV's where I'm going to be. I love it. And so I encourage you, even if you think this is where you're going to stay forever, it's always good to know that there's other options out there. So
that's wonderful. Well, let's go back then. If while we got that nugget there to unpack a little bit, because most of the people on this call are juniors or most are seniors and a couple are juniors. But I mean, tell us a little bit about that. You're a freshman in college, and you have the wherewithal, the awareness, and the ability to target a position, at a television station and start as a working journalist while you're just beginning your coursework. Tell us about how that came about and how you got the courage up to do that and how it all transpired.
Yeah, it kind of we'll go back to high school real quick, because I feel like that's kind of where it started. So when I was in high school, I grew up in Dothan, Alabama. And my role, if you will, and it's funny considering what I do now, with a lot of the clubs and organizations at the school I went to, was the PR person or the spokesperson. And so I did a lot of work with our local journalists on the education beat to bring awareness to some of the projects we were working on, fundraising, events, all that kind of good stuff. And so I made really good friends with 3 reporters, one at each station. And when I graduated, I came to Auburn, and at our orientation, I saw the TV station and I thought, you know what, this is super cool. So when I came to Auburn, I was not interested in doing journalism. I will throw that out there. My plan was to come and study pre-med and be a physical therapist. And I took one chemistry class, and that went out the door very quickly. Maybe some of you have experienced that. So I decided, oh, well, this will be cool. I always enjoyed hanging out with these reporters when I was in high school and getting to know them. I'll never do this when I leave, when I get out of college. This will be a great time to just have some fun, be on TV, report. I think it's interesting. It'll be great. So obviously chemistry didn't go well. And I said, okay, I've got to pivot, got to do something else. And I was loving what I was doing at the TV station here on campus. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. This is what I'm passionate about. I'm enjoying it. And so let's just go for this. And so I had switched. And of course, I'm still have kept in touch with the reporters that I became friends with. And it was actually really funny. So one of them, she worked in Dothan and then came up here to work for WSFA and covered the Auburn area. And so if you know anything about Auburn, I'm not sure how many of y'all are from here. I was in the science building, which is on one side of campus, and had to go to the College of Liberal Arts, which was on the other side. And the way we change majors is you literally carry a folder from one building to the other. and I had gone and got it from the science building, was walking across to the liberal arts building, and I saw one of those reporters that I was friends with standing on the concourse and said, "Hey," to her.
Wow.
And she said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "I think I'm changing my major." And she said, "Oh, are you finally changing to journalism?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually I am." And it was like that moment where I was like, okay, I feel like I'm making the right decision here. And so I did. I changed to journalism and had reached back out to one of my friends that was still in Dothan because I knew I'd be going home. And this was probably, okay, I didn't make it long. This was like October, November of my freshman year. So
Right.
I chatted with this friend and said, "Hey, I would love to come down. I can't do it for credit, but I'd love to come down and intern with y'all and just see how things work in a newsroom this summer. Would that be possible?" And she said, "I got to talk to the news director. That'd be his call, but I'm sure we can make that work." And so I was going home a couple weeks later, and she said, "Yeah, so Steven, who's the news director there, who's a really good friend of mine now, he said he'd love to have you come in. He had seen my tape because my goal was to do a story a week because I was like, that's the only way I'm going to get better." And so I'd had several stories at that point. And he said, "Yeah, we'd love for you to come down, come hang out with us." And I was eager. And so after I went to watch a show, get to know everybody. We went out to dinner afterwards, and then they were like, "Well, if you want, you could just come hang out for a couple days during your Christmas break. If you want to, you don't have to." So I was like, "Yes, I'll work every day," because I was eager. And so I did. And my Christmas present that year, I was editing a package or a BOSOP for someone to front. And the news director called me into his office and he said, "Hey, you're going to front this on the news tonight." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Merry Christmas." And I was like, "Oh, all right then." So I did it, and I guess I impressed them. I guess they liked it, and they brought me back that summer full time. And I was on the beach in St. George's Island when a hurricane came in. Was at all different crime scenes. I mean, it was crazy. I really don't know, and I tell him this all the time, what he was thinking letting me be on TV after one semester of school. But that was his
Wow.
call, I guess. So parlayed that over. I did some anchoring while I was there too when some people were out, and kind of parlayed that into getting the gig in Columbus when I came back to Auburn that next fall.
Well, that's an incredible story of being in the right place in the right time, and obviously making something of a slim opportunity and turning it into something. You also mentioned in your anecdote there the fact that you've kept in touch with all of these people to this day. So tell me a little bit about how important it is to build that network of people and then maintain those relationships, even though you're no longer a journalist.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of these folks in this course are getting exposed to a wide variety of people from all different walks of our industry. So talk a little bit about the importance of networking in journalism, but also in just whatever you do.
For sure. Yeah. And I know Elizabeth White talked to y'all about this a few weeks ago. She's a great friend of mine. We worked together for about a year. And she talked about those relationships and making those connections with people on your beats. But I mean, journalism, and I'm sure Gina's told you this, is such a small business. I mean, I, I, I can almost guarantee, and I still to this day will have news directors that I know or people that are hiring managers at stations all across the country. If someone applies from Auburn, I'm probably getting a phone call just because they know I know most of the people that have come through here. They know me from my time in Columbus or from Dothan. And I've got friends that work at the Nexstar bureau in DC, stations in San Antonio. Like it's crazy to think I worked in two somewhat small markets, and people just go everywhere. But it's true. It's such a small business. But even more than that, it's a business that a lot of people don't understand. Your families will not get what you do, why you run into hurricanes and the late nights and all of that. And so it's really, I think, just staying connected with people that you've had great relationships in the industry. Even if you leave, if they leave the business, there's still those common understandings and that support there. I mean, I have a group text with the team I worked with in Dothan, our news director, two reporters and an anchor, that we're all still best friends to this day. We talk every day, whether it's just about what's happening in the news that day, how their station's covering it, what our thoughts are, what we would do, story ideas. Because it really is, one thing that happens in one place can pop off and be a story somewhere else. And, you have those common understandings to be able to talk through things. And, sometimes it's commiserating, sometimes it's enjoying those things together, but relationships are so crucially important in this business. for your advancement, but also just to be able to have people that understand what you're going through and the struggles that you're facing and that have been there before. I mean, my friend that's a news director, he's at the other station in Dothan now. But I mean, we'll text back and forth and he's like, man, I don't know. This is what we're dealing with. I'm trying to figure out, you were a reporter, you worked for me, and I've got friends that work for him now. And he's like, how am I thinking too much into this? Am I reading into this too much? And it's a really good check for me to be able to say, yeah, this is what I would think if I was in the reporter's shoes. And for me, as someone not in the business anymore, I pitch stories down there to them. I send stories over to WRBL, and I keep up because I'm a news junkie. My wife, it drives her nuts. I want to be home to see Nora O'Donnell at 5:30 and, try to catch a little bit of the networks that night. And she thinks I'm an addict, and I probably am. But it's, that's part of my job. One of the many things that I do here is media relations. And so understanding not only what's happening, but how stations are interested in that, what they may be interested in, and having that experience from TV and staying connected. So I'm hearing from people in the industry about how they're doing things, because things change all the time, is super, super important. And having those relationships really helps with that.
So then you're in school, you're working journalist, you're taking your courses, you're progressing, you're getting experience, and you can jump in, and you have friends in the industry too. And not that this is universal, but there's a commonality at times. People get in their first job and they learn a lot, they get excited, they move to their second job, then they're 4 or 5 years into the industry, and they get to a point where it's like, okay, by that time maybe families come into play, mortgage comes into play, kids come into play, and people start thinking about, like, what am I going to do with this career? Am I going to go ahead and commit and work my way up this ladder and get to network or something like that, or am I going to move into management, or what might I do at this mark? And you actually hit that mark right when you were about to officially go out into the working world out of school. So tell us a little bit about you were confronting that a little bit earlier maybe than some of the folks that are coming out of school now. What went through your head? What were you thinking? What kind of opportunities were coming your way to kind of like make that pivot and go in a different direction? How'd you arrive at that?
For sure. Yeah. So I definitely hit this point earlier in my career than I was expecting to. But yeah, so I was butting up on my senior year, was still working in TV in Columbus. I got talked into, it was a great opportunity, but I was doing the morning show on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays. So I was getting up in Auburn at 2 a.m, Saturdays and Sundays, driving to Columbus, doing a shift until noon, sleeping the rest of the day, waking up and doing it again the next day, which was a great opportunity. I was supposed to be filling in for a month, and 8 months later, I was like, I'm about to die. I can't do this anymore. So I ended up back in East Alabama. And as I was getting ready to graduate, I was still working in Columbus. I didn't want to not stay in Columbus, but I had, ambitions of moving up the ladder. To kind of frame where my head was, my dream, my goal was to be a reporter at WSB in Atlanta. Have a lot of respect for WSB, the folks there, the company. And so I said, that's what I want to do. How can I get there? And I'm a future planner. I'm always looking 3-4 steps ahead to think, okay, what do I want to do? How do I get there? My therapist would probably tell you it's a coping mechanism for my anxiety, but it's fine. It works in this situation. But so I was like, okay, well, I need to start jumping markets. I need to go here, go there to make my way up. And so I had been applying different places, and I told, she was my fiance at the time, now my wife, I've been doing this a while. I've got more experience than most people coming out. I want to have a job lined up by spring break, which is laughable now. And so I got to that point, and I had some serious calls with some folks and some different stations. And what was funny is I would put on my resume, that I would allude to the fact that I was still in school, and I'd get on a call with folks and they'd say, oh yeah. So we want you to start, towards the end of April so we can get you in before the May book. And I was like, well, I don't graduate till May 15th. So that's going to be a problem. And they're like, wait, you're still in school? And I was like, yeah, it was on my resume. And so that became a problem because they were trying to fill positions quicker than I was able to fill them. So we got to the end of the year, and one thing led to another, and I had an opportunity to interview with a position at WJAX, WFOX in Jacksonville, which is Action News Jax. It's the sister station of WSB in Atlanta. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is how I'm going to get my foot in the door with this company and work my way up. There's a direct pipeline a lot of times from that station to Atlanta.
Yep.
And I said, okay, this is it. This is how I'm going to do it. And so me and my wife, she had some connections down there. She worked for iHeart here in Opelika. And so we were like, okay, we can go down there. The offices are in the same building. Even if she can't get a job there, we had some other friends with some stuff lined up for her. And I was like, okay, we'll go down there. I'll interview and it'll be great. We'll see what happens. We get down there. And the reason they wanted me, so I was working here in East Alabama. I worked with Elizabeth White. After she left to go to WRBL, I kind of filled her shoes over at the other station. And so I had a lot of experience working in a bureau and loved it. And so they were wanting to start a bureau in St. Johns County, which is just south of Maine, Jacksonville. And it's one of the fastest growing, biggest counties, or fastest growing, most expensive counties in Florida, which, if you know anything about reporter salaries, is exactly where you want to be when you start out. And so I said, okay, this will be a great opportunity. I'll get to start something new, use my experience. We got down there the day before and drove around, went to St. Johns County, drove around Jacksonville, and my wife and I got back to the hotel that night. And we just kind of looked at each other, and she didn't want to put down what I was feeling. She goes, so what did you think today about Jacksonville? And, you know, had it just been me, had I not been considering, okay, I've got a family, all this kind of stuff, I would have been like, oh, it sucks, but I'm here for it. You know, I don't like Jacksonville. I didn't love the city when we were driving around. I said, but, you know, it'll be fine. I can stay here. But I told her, I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I mean, we'd be far away from the city. I didn't even really love the city. I don't know how we're going to make this work. I just don't think we'd be happy here. And she looked at me and said something, and it was very wise of her. She said, so what are you going to do tomorrow when they show you all the fancy toys at the TV station? And because she knew that would get me to have the LED screen, the fancy sets, the weather tracking vehicles. Severe weather is my favorite. And I said, yeah, it's going to be hard. I said, but I don't think I can. I don't think I can live here and be happy for 2 or 3 years. And so got offered the job, ended up turning it down. And we kind of had decided after we had that conversation, it kind of framed where we were. And I said, you know, we love Opelika, which is where we live. It's right next to Auburn. It's a great family town, great community. And we said, you know, this is where we want to start our family. If we decide to have kids, we want to raise them here. We've got family nearby. And so I said, you know, let's stay here. Let's make this our home. And so I went back to the station I was working for and in Columbus and said, hey, you know, I'm looking to stay now. We've kind of changed our minds. You know, is there a place for me here? And I was super lucky. We had a vice president at our corporate office that I met once or twice that apparently really liked me and helped make a spot for me there, even though there wasn't really one. I produced the news for 4 or 5 months when I got out of school. So that was not what I had planned, right? Like I've been reporting, I've been on air, I've been anchoring, you know, helped improve the ratings on our morning show more than they had ever been. And there I was in the producer chair, not on air, not chasing down stories right after I graduated, which is not what I had planned at all. But I fell in love with producing. It's still one of the things, like if I'm going to have a conversation with someone about news, I'm probably going to be talking about the producing angle of it because I think it's the most fun. And so did that for a while, went back to reporting. And then, you know, I kind of came to a place, there were a few compounding things that made me decide, okay, maybe this isn't for me anymore. I was struggling with my mental health at the time, and I thought a lot of that was related to what I was dealing with in news. It's a hard life. It's a great, you know, it's a great career, but it is hard. You see a lot of things. I saw some really rough stuff working nights, weekends, early mornings in Columbus and East Alabama. And so that was a large part of it. I also had some differences in news philosophy and beliefs with our news management at the time, and they were making some decisions about our coverage in East Alabama that I wasn't on board with. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to stay there long term. And like I said, I'm always looking 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. And so I decided, okay, if I'm not going to Atlanta anymore, what's my move here? Like, what am I going to do? And so I said, okay, I'm going to produce for a little while I have to. jump back into reporting, do that gig for a while. I was in line to be the East Alabama bureau chief after our current one had his contract in and he moved on, and said, I'll do that for a while. And then I want to try to get into management, be an assistant news director, be a news director. I still think it's one of the coolest jobs in the world. And so, but I realized sitting over here in East Alabama, I wasn't going to be able to sit and deal with what I was dealing with for a long period of time. And you know, there was a station biting on our hills coming for our ratings, and I saw the improvements they were making. I was like, you know, I don't want to be part of this ship as it goes down, which is probably a terrible way to think about it. But I knew what we should be doing because I had done it. I had done it with our station previously, and it wasn't happening anymore. And I said, I can't be happy doing this. It's not going to fulfill me coming to work every day. And so I said, I've got to make a change. Started looking and really lucked into this job back at Auburn that really checked all the boxes for me, and really let me parlay what I was doing into a job outside of the news industry.
That's great. That's gracious of you to share that experience, and so many lessons for folks to learn there. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. What are you responsible for? What are some of the cool things you're involved with? What skills that you learned in coursework and in journalism play into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so like you said in the beginning, I'm the director of multimedia services for the College of Liberal Arts. And so basically the way I describe it is any digital experience that you have with our college, besides the physical website, we have a guy that's his sole job. I kind of manage all of the other things. So I manage all of our social media from Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. We have digital sign TV display things. You know, if you've been on a college campus, you've seen those. I manage all of those. One thing that I've kind of moved into, one of our big areas that we're focused on is recruitment of students. And so I do a lot of work with our recruiter. She kind of meets with all the students and has that personal interaction. And I do all of the digital marketing. So every touch point those students have, not on our campus, comes through my office, doing emails, texting with students, targeted advertising, all of that digital marketing stuff is kind of everything that I'm handling right now. And it's been a really neat experience for me because when I came in, my job was video production, which I still do, and social media. And as we've grown, and this is one thing that I think I carried over from working in journalism, you know, there's this, you've always got what's next, how am I gonna wow this audience next? How am I gonna bring them into the story next? And thinking about new ways of doing things. And that's really benefited me in this space, because it helps me stay one step ahead of where we need to be, or get us on pace with where we need to be. And so when I started, if you were a student and you came to visit our campus and you met with our recruiter in the College of Liberal Arts, you may get a postcard a couple days later. They may call you before the registration deadline, but that was about it. And it was working for what they needed to do. But when we wanted to ramp up our recruitment of students, you know, we've built out, probably 15-week messaging strategy. I've got a 60-page marketing plan that I put together every year on how we're going to go about reaching these students, sending them text messages, making sure they're engaged. And so that understanding of multi-platform engagement that comes from working in broadcast news has been super helpful here, because I understand how they all play together, and how, you know, this bit of information from this email and this bit of information from this text and this thing they saw on social, how it all kind of ties together to build that experience. You know, one of the things I definitely picked up when I was producing was legal pads. I don't know if y'all keep these around, but I always have one or two with me to keep me on track. So I'll be looking down at these. But, you know, one thing, and I would love for some of y'all, I want to be interactive, so I'm just not talking at you the whole time. I know some of the other folks have talked to you about driving people back to the website. Liz said she'll put together a story, put it in the link, and then jump on Facebook Live. So in TV, why do we drive people back to the website? Why do we want to do that? Anybody got thoughts on that?
I'll go with that, Brandon. I think the reason why is because that's the future of local news, is because more people than ever are consuming local news via social media, via the internet, and a lot of people don't have the time to watch a broadcast anymore.
For sure. And so the big part of that, right? We usually make money off of commercials. Now we make money off of digital ads. And so for us journalists, it's so they can get the big story. And for our companies, it's like, so they can give us the money from those eyes on our ads. And so that's exactly right. You want them to go there to get the full information, but we can also make money off of those folks while they're there. So my job, I'm looking at that same thing. How do I drive people back to my website? And we're actually rebuilding our website so they have a great experience when they're there. But one of the things I look at is, okay, I can give them this information in a text, but I don't want to give them everything. I want to get them back to the website. I want to get them to download this flyer that they have to give me their email for. I want to get them to interact with this video so they can capture this whole story of where we're at, not just this one little blurb here, one little blurb there. And that's one thing we really focus on or have since I've been here. And I actually had my colleague who sits next to me said to me the other day, we were talking about content strategy. And he said, I've never met someone that can repurpose a piece of content in so many different ways like you can. And I accredit that to my time working in TV. You have a package, you turn it into a BOSOT, you turn it into a VO, it's a web story, you got to tease it on social media. And like, you have to make it different everywhere because I don't want to see the same thing. I need a different experience for the app. And so you have to really think about like, how is the viewer engaging with this, and how is the viewer, what are they getting out of this? Like, one of my least favorite things, it drives me nuts when I watch TV and they tell you this whole beautiful story and then they're like, there's more on the app. And so you go to the app and it's the exact same thing. And so when I was a producer, I was always like, why am I driving people to the app? If it's a court story, do I have like court documents on the app that I'm pushing to? Do I have some extra thing that I can't give them? Like, I'm not just going to push people to the app for them to get there and be annoyed when they get there that they're not getting anything else. And so I look at that same thing, like, what's the added value that I can give to these students to make their experience better, or to these prospective students or faculty members? Like, what's that added value? And if there's not a value add, what's the point? And it's really like, you don't want to waste people's time, right? Like, you don't want to get people annoyed with your brand because you're making all these promises that you're not keeping, or you're saying this is there and it's not. And so that's one of those things that I really focus on, is like, how am I influencing this customer journey from prospective student to deposited student to coming to our Camp War Eagle, which is our, I want to say enrollment camp, but that's not what it's called. It's orientation. Thank you, Gene. That's the word I was looking for. To our orientation, to actually showing up in class on the first day. And it's that kind of same thing. Like, in news, I want to get them from my Facebook Live to the website for more, but I would love for them to tune in that night for like the whole shebang. Like, what's the finale, if you will, of this story. And so we look at it different ways. Like, I call it a customer journey. Here, you're just trying to continue engaging your audience in news. And that's so important. And you have to think about it a different way, and you use different words, but it's the same concept across each of these platforms.
A couple key points there, Brandon. Number one is, I meet a lot of students that are about to embark on their journey, and they have had a course of study structured in a way where, are you a journalist? Then you do this. Are you a TV person? Well, you do this. But then they get into the real world and they realize you got to do it all. You got to be able to shoot a video package, write a web story, post on social, things like that. So, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, and then relate it back to your previous journalism experience. And where did you have that epiphany? Is like, okay, it's not just one thing, it's really everything.
Yeah. So when I was, one of the things I don't think I've mentioned, I briefly did, I worked for Eagle Eye TV here on campus, and I was an anchor. I produced shows, and that's kind of where I got like I made my mistakes. I definitely made plenty of those in the professional world too, but I really was able to kind of like get those reps in on how to do the different things, and ended up running the station my senior year. And one of my very best friends was my creative director. We have two divisions at Eagle Eye. We have a creative division and a news division, very similar to how commercial stations work. And my creative director is a video genius. He actually announced yesterday he just got the job running all of the football social videos for the Auburn Tigers. So he's wow, top notch at what he does. And so he had encouraged me, and he loved the Adobe suite, and we had just gotten Adobe on campus. He was like, you need to learn to use Photoshop. You need to learn to use Premiere. We were using Final Cut. And I said, okay, cool, show it to me, teach me. And so we sat down, and so I learned to edit photos and build and manipulate things in Photoshop, and how to very, very, very basically use After Effects. I know just enough to mess up a good After Effects file, and how to use Premiere and how they all work together. And I helped him with some creative videos that we did, and I knew the new stuff. And so that was kind of where I started saying, okay, like there's things on this promotional side and on the creative video side that I can use in my news packages. When I would do sweeps pieces, I would get into Photoshop and create graphics that work with our brand, because that's important, but that help tell the story and elevate, because there's certain things you can show in a graphic that just no matter what you do, you can't show with some wallpaper video. My personal favorite, standing up against a brick wall, pointing at things and making things, stats show up and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's engaging and it takes a long time to do, but if you know how to do it, you get quicker and quicker, and it makes your storytelling better because you can showcase your content better. And that's kind of where I started working through that idea of, this marketing side, this commercial side plays in with the news side in a way. Like, you have to be careful. Obviously there's boundaries there, but there is overlap in some of the skill sets there. And so when I was working in Columbus, we had a digital marketing manager that a lot of her focus at the time, streaming was becoming really big. It has been, but it was becoming a big part of what we were doing in local TV. And so she was, working on the channel for the Fire Sticks and the Apple TVs and all of that. And I had a Roku at the time. And so I think I was the only person in the news department that actually owned like a Roku. So I was the only one that could even see that digital stream and was even thinking about it. And so we would have conversations regularly. If I had some time, I'd walk in there and we'd chat about the channel, what we could be doing, how do we actually use this? Because again, we want to add value. We want to give something to our viewers that they can't get other places. And so we were talking about original content for this and that sort of thing. And like I said, I wanted to be a news director. I love the being able to think in the big picture and the ideas. And she told me that, and I was like, you know what? We want to do original content. I got this. And I came back. I spent all night. I was so excited. I spent all night, and I was like building out this plan of how do we take the personnel we have now and these teams of people that we have, and how do we tweak little things? Because I had done everything at that point, right? I had produced, I'd worked the assignment desk, I had anchored, I had worked in the production booth. So I kind of had an idea of how everybody worked together and what their schedules looked like. And I was like, okay, how do we take little things that people are doing and actually create original content for this that adds value for the viewers? That's something. And I think I came back the next day with a pitch for like 4 or 5 original show type things that we could do for our digital channels that wouldn't require us to go hire more people, because that's a big deal in journalism. You can't just go hire people to do different things. So and it was that kind of thing too, right? Of like, I learned in that how these play together, and how, yes, I have to, we want to sell ads, we want to do that kind of thing, but you have to have, it's the chicken and egg thing, right? Like, you have to have content to sell ads for, but you have to have ads to pay for the content. And so it's this very weird thing. So how do you make more content, make more money, but not cost more money overall? And those are still things I do today, right? Like, I'm looking, okay, so this is our goal. We want to recruit this many students. It's going to bring in this much money. I can't just use all of this money. We got to pay people salaries. How do I work this in between to be able to add value with what we're doing, serve our students, not break the bank? And so those kind of things really came into play. I will, full disclosure here, we never produced any of those shows that I talked about. I've actually pitched that. My friend that's a news director in Dothan, I was like, you're starting a channel? Here, take this. Like, somebody do something with it. But it's that same idea, and there's so many things, and I think this is really important. I've talked to several people that work in the TV business that are looking to get out, and it's understanding how what you do relates to these outside jobs. But I think almost even more important than that, it's how you're able to explain to other people how what you do relates to those outside jobs. I feel like, and y'all know this, a lot of people look at what we do in TV and they assumed the reporter, I don't know, I guess they just kick back all day and there's a photographer running around grabbing a bunch of stuff. And then at 5 o'clock, you're like, oh, yes, it's time for me to get up and 3, 2, 1, let me do my live shot. And that's it. And it's just this glamorous thing. They don't see the you're running around, you're calling sources, you're getting video, you're editing it, you're putting the story together, you're thinking about what your audience cares about. Like there's all of these different things that are so relevant in outside careers. I actually had a guy that worked in Montgomery that reached out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. That's my platform of choice. I love it. But he reached out and said, hey, I don't think this is going to be for me. I want to get out. I know you've done it. Would you look over my resume and tell me what you think? And I printed it out because I thought this would be relevant. I'm not going to tell you who he is because I don't want to do that to him. But this is what he put as his experience from the TV station he worked at. And he was applying for a job doing basically what I do here at Auburn. Responsibilities include weekend sports anchor, fill-in anchor during weekday sportscast, helping edit, Final Cut Pro, so he was putting in there that's what he was using. Produce daily shows, sports specials, live reporting for weekly high school pregame, college coverage, and any other type of sporting event. He puts in here the events that he covered: college football playoffs, SEC Media Days, Sugar Bowl, Camellia Bowl, and that's it from his last job, which is great. And here's the thing: like if I'm applying to another station, I think it says something to be able to put on there that my station trusted me to cover these big events, that I did these extra shows and these specials and anchored and all this stuff. It's great. But people outside the business don't necessarily understand what is involved in that. And so what I told him, I said, okay, let's think about this, not like we know what you did. Let's think about this in other ways. So maybe instead of saying responsibilities include weekend sports anchor, fill-in anchor, all this other stuff. Okay, so you were the anchor, you were guiding that ship. So like when I was the anchor at on the morning show, I had 10 people or so that across the weekend that was working on that show. So I put in there that I was supervising and providing editorial judgment for 10 people and building out and working. And so it's those kinds of things. Shooting and editing video, especially if you're applying for a video position, those are pretty standard. They make sense. They'll make sense to people. But don't phrase it as produce 3 packages a day. Nobody outside of the business is going to know what that means. And so it's thinking through, like, if I'm looking at this as someone that doesn't know anything about TV, I've got to be able to sell them on how my experiences translate. So story mining, when you're on social media and you're looking for stories, we would call that social listening. It's the same thing. It's a different name. And so I still, because I pitch stories over to WRBL and to stations all over the place all the time. And so I still, every morning, I'm like, okay, what are the big stories? How can I match my people to it? What are people talking about? Still happens every day. It's just like, when I get ready to go into a meeting at the TV station and I'm looking for stories, what are the community members talking about? I'm kind of doing the same thing, but what are the TV stations talking about? Editing is pretty similar. We've talked about social, getting people to watch is the end goal, or to go to your website is the end goal of social and TV. For me, it's to get them to engage. And so help using that language, that engagement language is always great. If you're a great MMJ, you'll be really good at brand storytelling. One of my favorite books still is by Al Tompkins. It's called Aim for the Heart. And it's about how to write and how to just like pierce people with your words and to tell good stories. Because at the end of the day, like, if you think about like Apple, for example, they're not telling you they have great computers. They're telling you that their computers are going to give you a great experience. And also they compute really well. And so it's those same kind of things. Like, we work every day to humanize our brand, to make people relate to it in the same way that you want people to relate to your story. So like, for example, we're working on an ad campaign for one of our programs. And one of the things that I know, I can give people facts and figures all day long. Like, 2/3 of our people have a job when they leave. The average ACT score is this. The average money they're making is this. And those are all great and they help. But nothing is going to connect with a student more than when I put another student in front of them and let them tell their story. And, in journalism, what you're doing, you're going to capture that story and edit it down. Fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, on this end of things, I have it a little different. I typically do a Zoom meeting like this beforehand, get their story and build out a script, because I need them to say it very concisely, and include our brand elements. And then we record it and they speak directly to our students. That's super important. And it captures that same idea of things you're looking for in journalism, but you're doing it for a brand and promoting something rather than telling, just a true story, if you will. And the other thing I can say, if you can sell anything after a career in journalism, it's work ethic and immediacy. There is nothing like, I mean, you come into work at, let's say you're working a day shift, you're lucky, you come in at 9, you got to have something on by 5. If it's not done till 5:01, you're screwed, and you better have it ready by 6 if you still have a job by then. I mean, it's very, very deadline driven. The first day I was working here at Auburn, I was working on a project, and it was a couple days in, and my boss came up to me, and it was like 4:30, we get off at 4:45, and she said, "Hey, go ahead and shut it down for the day. It'll be here tomorrow." And I went, "What?" Like, it's not done. Like, I'm only halfway there. And she's like, it'll be there tomorrow. It's fine. And so it was a learning curve for me, realizing like, oh, I have a couple days to get this done. I don't have to like come into work, get one project, do it, and leave. Like so it's a different world on that end. That took some getting used to. But you have that work ethic, I mean, there are very few things where you'll work harder than the hustle you do for journalism. And so having that coming into a more relaxed environment makes you stand out, because you're able to, you can juggle 13 different things that you've got going on at once, but you're able to get them done and kind of cut through the clutter to get there. And so you really just have to know how to sell people on that and let them see, okay, they don't just know how to stand in front of a TV and talk. Like, there's real things that they're doing that apply to the job that I'm hiring for.
Great points. Great points. Thank you, Brandon. There's one thing you mentioned earlier that I'd like to tease out real quick, and then I'll open it up for questions. Specifically to your point about understanding metrics. We had a presentation earlier in this course about explaining Nielsen ratings and how that the structure of the television industry is really determined. The DMAs are determined on the rating system. The size of the market, the revenue that influences that market was set in place by the ratings company years and decades ago. So this idea in what you do, and of course what we do in digital and social, understanding the metrics. Tell me a little bit about your journey to master that, and how important that is in what you do now, and of course in what we do.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey, and these companies change it every single day. I'm in groups of people that do this across the country, and every day it's like, the algorithm has changed again, and this has changed, and now there's not likes on Instagram, and it's just this whole ordeal. And so it really is, it's a moving target. And luckily, there's some people that work for folks that don't understand that, and I'm really lucky to work for someone that does. And I will tell her today, hey, this is what the metrics show, and this is what it means, but she understands that tomorrow it may look different. And so, I keep a really good track on our metrics, and I think it's, again, something I learned from TV. Your news director is watching those ratings. You may not see it every day, but your news director does, and they're seeing how you're relating to your audience. And it's one of the reasons I really wanted to work. One of my goals was to work for WSB and for Cox, is because they have a really, really masterful understanding of how to use data to engage their audiences, and looking at their audience data and surveying them and understanding what they're interested in to tell better stories that serve them. And it's the exact same thing in what we do. I'm looking every day so I represent, our college has 13, 14 departments and schools within it. And I'm engaging people that range from, journalists to just within our programs. We've got content from journalism to English. Like, we've got someone that researches the words used for smells and writing in 18th century. Like, it's crazy. Just the vast people that are flying planes and playing instruments. Like, it's very inconsistent. It's not like the business or the engineering school, right, where I can just say, it's engineering. People will care about this because they care about engineering. And so I have to look at very carefully, when I'm posting things, what are the metrics telling me? What are they say? Like, who's engaging with what content? And that helps me better see, how I can engage these people, because I'm representing those programs, right? But I'm also looking at our metrics. And we just went through a process of building out our social plan for this year. And I know, based on these programs, right, and the analytics globally from these platforms, for me, prospective students and current students and some young alumni, our primary channel to reach them is Instagram. For our government leaders, for advocacy groups, research-based groups, faculty, most of them are on Twitter. For our donors, our alumni, and then some of those other groups as well, we're more likely to see them on Facebook. And then, we engage with employers and things like that over on LinkedIn. And so I have to gauge what I'm posting where based on who I know is there. It's like we have 3 goals. One is being to promote student growth and student enrollments. One is to drive affinity for some of our programs that we're working on, different programs we've got coming forward that we're going to be trying to promote soon. So we want to be building up that profile. And the other is to promote the research that our faculty is doing. That's a big deal. We're a major research university. Right. And so I look at that and I say, for example, with research, right? We're looking at how do we promote our research in a way that people care, in a way that I can get Gene to pick it up on WRBL tonight, in a way that drives interest, shows real world benefit. So I know, right, that I said, I know that those audiences are probably most likely to be reached on Twitter and LinkedIn. So I'm thinking, how do I engage that? Like, how do I write it different for Gene and the folks in the news business on Twitter than I would for a donor on Facebook? And it's right. It may be the exact same story, but I may be presenting it in a different way. Or we're about to start a podcast that's based around research, and it's called Things You Didn't Know You Didn't Know. We're actually getting ready to shoot the first episode this week. And it's our attempt, because right, I know based on numbers, I'm going to be hard pressed to find someone to tune into a podcast that is both interested in flying a plane and the words used to describe smell in the 18th century. Like it's going to be hard. And I told our team, I was like, I don't want to put out a podcast. I don't want to, it's the big thing in higher ed. Everybody has a podcast. I guess it's the big thing everywhere right now. Everybody's got a podcast. But I don't want to put something out that I'm not going to be able to attract people into. And so I was literally, I'm in grad school. So I was studying, listening to Spotify, and I heard something, and I don't even remember what it was that I heard that sparked this idea, things you didn't know you didn't know. We have all this obscure research, all these crazy different topics that people know nothing about and would not even know was a field of study. And so that has become our hook of, I know people are interested in these random things. They'll sit and listen for 30 minutes to these random things. So that's what we're going to make the pitch of this. It won't necessarily be that we're going to engage them on the research topic. While I do want to do that, I want to engage them on this whole idea that we're exploring things that they didn't even know there was to be explored, and to give them something interesting out of it. And so that's kind of a metrics guided project that we've gone down. Is we weren't just going to do it for the sake of doing it. There's got to be, like I said before, a value add. We've got to have something that's going to add value. And I know just from the metrics that I've seen from looking at our engagement and our followers and the way people are responding to things, how all of that comes together. And it's, I didn't know this all when I started. I knew like count, I knew shares, I got that stuff because I did do social marketing, if you will, as a person. Y'all have your news Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and whatnot. Right. And you do that to some level. And you know that if I share on this topic, it's going to get a lot of shares. If I share about the severe weather coming tomorrow, it's going to get shared, and you make sure to do that. And so it's that same idea, right? I know I've got a almost cult-like following in the marching band and in the aviation program. And so if I need a boost in my numbers one week, I'm posting about aviation or music or both, and it's going to work. And it's not to, I don't say that to be like, we're cheap in the metrics or whatever, but I know that those people care so much about their programs. And so they help drive that affinity, get that conversation going, and they're always there and they're loyal to their programs. And so knowing that, I know what I need to do to engage those folks on a better level. So yeah, metrics, super important, knowing what they say, knowing how they change, invaluable.
Great point. I want to make sure we have time for questions. We're 10 minutes left in the hour here. So anybody, Grace, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, please.
So Brandon, first of all, thank you so much for being here. And I'm literally so glad you're here because I am in the flip-flop situation that you are. I am one of 2 photographers for JSU's photographic services. So I'm in Jacksonville State University. I've worked for their marketing for 4 years. But my major is in broadcast journalism with a minor in photography. I have done photography since 2015, and I'm so safe in my university experience. And I'm like really good at it, and I love what I do, but I'm also like I need to do stuff in my major too, because I have this passion for the reality and motion that we see and capturing that. I don't really, it's a question, but it's also more of like, I don't know, just I guess advice for this too. I'm literally, how do you like, I'm about to apply for universities and for news. And I'm very scared because I have all of this experience in one area and not all of this experience like underlying in another area. My portfolio is huge, but it's not like news portfolio. So how do you like, what's advice that you would give to somebody that has content that's applying for two different sorts of like work? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
what I will say, the main thing that I would say first off is I would not be as good as I feel like I am at my job currently had I not had my experience in TV news. I would not be able to pitch stories the way I do. You know, one thing I tell my folks is, look, I'll help you pitch stories because I was the producer receiving those pitches at one point. I know what they're looking for. I know if I send them basically the VO already written and some content, that I have a decent chance of them putting it on there. So like knowing those things is super important, and don't ever discount the experience that you have, because you bring something different to the table, right? Diversity is super important in the newsroom, whether it's racial diversity, whether it's gender identity, whether it's just experience that you've had. Everyone plays a role in understanding you represent a different part of the community that you're coming from.
okay.
What I would say is, if I'm you and I'm looking to jump into broadcast and you've got a decent understanding of the broadcast side of things, but you also have this photography background, I would sell myself as saying, you're gonna I'd tell a news director, look, I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna be the MMJ you need, but you're gonna have some damn good photos for your website when I go out to a scene. You know, like that is important. It's not just gonna be a screenshot from what I'm capturing on the camera. Like, I'm gonna take some good pictures, and the newspaper's not gonna have anything on me. You know, that's because those are things that are important, right? When we think about value adds, if I can go to a scene, and it depends on the scene you're at, you got to be careful. But, if I can go to something and capture a video and a story, but I can also embed a photo slideshow into my digital story, that's important. That's something your producer can push to. And so like understanding and being able to sell to a news director that idea, I think it lets them see that you're not just thinking about the one thing that everybody else is. It's for you a value add. I feel like I've said that 100 times during this. But also on the other side of it, if you're working with, or you want to apply to universities, being able to say, you've done this internship, you've worked with Gene, you've seen how news operations work, being able to sell that and say, okay, obviously we want to get these great photos to capture what's happening on campus and to be able to support our groups. But when there's news happening on a campus, now I say this lightly because, they're not going to want you running around taking pictures of all the bad things happening on campus, because you would be in a marketing role. Yes. But when there's good things happening, being able to, them knowing that you can, one, take awesome pictures, but two, if you need to, you know how to MMJ, you can jump out there with a camera, you can be that full person that you can ship stuff off to the TV station afterwards or to the newspaper or whoever. Like, it's understanding the kinds of content that are needed by these stations and in a marketing sense, and being able to provide that and explain that experience to them. So yeah, I think you have a great ability to kind of pivot between those two, and just knowing how to cross sell those will be a big help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just feel so torn because I'm like, what do I do? I have this experience, but I have this passion for this other thing, which is photojournalism and being on scene and capturing stuff and presenting images. So I'm so torn, but that helps a lot. Like, I just want to be more confident in like my experience and not so much like think I don't have enough in one area because I have more in another. So that helps a lot. Right. Thank you so much.
And I understand the being torn. I love broadcasts like none other. I talk to my friends that are in the business every day just so I can be like, and I've got my friend that's a news director. I'll talk to him and I'll be like, hey, have you thought about presenting it like this? Or, hey, I watched your 6, maybe do this for just because like it's a bug that never leaves you. Yeah. So I understand being torn. I know that we've got bad weather coming in tomorrow, and severe weather was my favorite. And that's the one time I kick myself that I'm not still in news because I miss it so much. But yeah, I understand. Yeah, just, follow your passion. And, at the end of the day, knowing that your first job isn't going to be your last job.
Okay.
You know, most likely, you know, unless you're in a very special situation, and you may get into the university, and you may be the opposite of me. You may decide this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. This is not the environment I want to be in. And you can switch to doing the other later, keeping your feet wet, staying current, knowing what's going on. But just because it's your first job doesn't mean it has to be your last job.
Okay, awesome. I just feel like there's so much pressure that like, that's it, you know, like that is your stuff. Have fun. But awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. I'll let somebody else take the floor. I don't want to hog it. So thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Anybody else have a question? Rolanda, go ahead.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you
Hi.
so much for talking with us today. I'm basically in the same boat with Grace. I'm terrified when it comes to, when it comes to finding jobs and stuff. I'm a broadcasting major at Jacksonville State University as well, minoring in sports management. And I've had experience with like the radio show and producing shows, you know, and coming up with ideas and stuff like that and working with audio. And my question for you is, I know that you talked about like your mental health, and I'm really big on like mental health, and and this process with with WH&T has been a really good experience of mine, and it has like somewhat challenged me with my how to balance everything. So what advice you would give us when it comes to dealing with our anxiety and basically just going out there into the world and be like this scary world that we live in, trying to find a job, because like it's scary out here. So what advice you would give when it comes to your mental health?
Yeah, it's absolutely scary to be in that situation. And mental health is a very real thing. And, me and my wife talk about this all the time. And, we try to be big advocates for those that are around us, because I feel like a lot of times, and I know you've heard this talked about, there's a stigma around talking about your mental health. A lot of people are like, oh, I have anxiety because they're stressed about something. And that's not really, anxiety is not just being stressed. It's a real mental issue for a lot of people. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that's important to understand. One thing I would say, and I'm glad I had a news director when I started out that told me this, once you get that first job, most every broadcast company, because they're bigger now, have something called an EAP, an employee assistance program, that has free confidential counseling for their employees. Which is huge. We love free things when we work in journalism.
Thank God.
Yes, but and a lot of programs have that. I'm really lucky here at Auburn. We have something similar. It's important to keep a track on where you are mentally. You see some rough stuff out there. The one thing that I'll never ever forget is me and Elizabeth White were out in Phoenix City. And there was a man that had killed his wife, had taken his son hostage in a house, and we were out on the scene down a dirt road. And we had our camera set up, and we were recording, honestly, for the sake of recording. It was pitch black, couldn't see anything. Liz was doing her Facebook Live. I was helping her out with that some. And, we were just trying to get an idea of what was going on, how much longer are we going to be here, like, what's the move here? And I looked through the viewfinder to try to see, this was a mistake, but try to see down what was going on. Was there any movement? And right at that moment that I looked through, shots were fired. The police killed the dad. He was probably 10 to 15-year-old son came running across the yard. And I'm like watching all of this, and I will never forget that. And so it really can trigger some rough feelings. And those are hard things to go to sleep after watching. And you see that a lot. But I would just say the one thing is to, there's no job that's worth your mental health. And I realized that very quickly. I still struggle with anxiety and with some other issues that are from some things that happened. My father passed away in my senior year of high school, and it was a traumatic situation. And so that's where a lot of mine came from. And I know that now it was not all the news business, but there was some there, heck, you get on TV and you say one wrong thing, your station gets sued and you could be out of a job. I mean, it's a very real, there's some very real things that you have to worry about. And doing that day in and day out can be hard, and it can be really hard on you. One thing I would say through the application process is knowing that there will be something out there. It may not be the exact job you want, but there's going to be something for you to do. and you will get a position somewhere. It will come. It may feel like it's not going to, but don't stress yourself to have the this big shiny fancy job. If it's producing and you want to be on air, produce for a while, get your feet wet, learn how to do that kind of thing. Don't let it be it's your first job. And I would have heard this and been like, you don't get it. I mean, I get it, but like, I know that sounds terrible. Like, oh, it's your first job. If it's not exactly what you want, it's fine, because you want to do what you want, right? Like, you spent goobs of money trying to get this degree to do exactly what you want to do, and then to not be able to do it. Like, that's
Right,
the worst.
yeah.
You just feel like it's almost like this desperation feeling of failure. Like, I didn't get to do what I set out to do.
Right.
But knowing that it's a part of this business, paying your dues are a real part of this business. It sucks, but it's a real thing. And so kind of tempering your expectations, knowing, I hope I get this job that I really want, but if I end up doing something else for a little while, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, thank you. Cause like, I mean, in this industry, cause like I've heard some stories about like, like get the story and then that's it. So I was like, wait a minute, like, about traumatic, things that be going on and things that we see on the day-to-day basis. Cause like, I know that we have to get the story, which is important, but like, I wanted to know like how is the mental health in this industry? Because like I said, I'm big on mental health and, um, and like I deal with anxiety as well, so I get where you coming from. So that's why I wanted to know about the whole, mental health aspect, because like this is my passion. I want to do broadcasting and and learn and grow within that. But like I want to make sure that my mental health is good, so I can be able to showcase my talent. If I would say,
Yeah, and I'll say somebody that I highly respect in that space is her name's Lauren Linehan. She's at WTVM in Columbus, and she has struggled with her mental health, and she's very open about that on her social media. And I would encourage you to follow her and see, because she's done a very good job of maintaining her professionalism, but being real with her audience and saying like, this is what I struggle with, and it's a real thing, and this is how my job and what you viewers say impacts that. And knowing there's going to be people that comment on what you wear, how you look, how you talk, what your hair looks like, whether they have the authority to or not. And that can cause, I think that's a part of this business a lot of people in school don't necessarily count on, being a big stressor, and she's dealt with that. And so I would encourage you to follow her, because she's been an advocate for folks that have been struggling with their mental health in this business, but also for helping people personalize that don't struggle with mental health. I think that's huge. We need more people that understand their mental health and are emotionally mature in that way.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great points.
For sure.
And great question. A couple other people you might want to follow: Lauren Sisler, who is had been a longtime sports reporter and anchor in the Birmingham market, and she for many years has been a reporter for ESPN. She also just came out with a documentary, honestly, about her struggle, precipitated by the fact that her mom and dad, unbeknownst to her, were both opioid addicts and died within hours of each other when she was just getting into the business. It was a traumatic experience for her, and she's shown a lot of courage in sharing what that brought in her life, and how she's hid it for a long time, and then has come forward in the last year to share with this documentary about that struggle of her parents and herself in the aftermath. And also another guy named Mark Joyella, who now works for IBM doing content marketing, who was a longtime reporter in markets across the Southeast, and then several stints in Miami and New York City. Mark has been very open and serves on a lot of journalism boards in terms of people being aware of and really being conscious of having to take care of yourself and attuning to your mental health needs. So both of those folks are also great resources for you as well.
I'll
Any
pivot
final
back,
question?
Gene,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
real quick to one thing we talked about earlier. We talked about those relationships and maintaining relationships with people in the business. I will say that group text that I have got me through a lot of rough things, and we get each other through them, because there's something with anxiety specifically that I've dealt with about knowing that you're not alone and that other people have dealt with it. And so having those relationships with people so that you've got other people that understand it, that's big as well. So definitely maintain those, because they really will come through and help you in those situations.
Great point. Any other questions from anybody? We're a little bit over our time, and I want to be respectful of Brandon's time. Brandon, any closing thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, good luck to y'all. I've been where you are fairly recently. I understand, and so good luck. If you need anything, please reach out. If you want to jump into the world of higher ed, or even if you just want to chat news with somebody that's not in it anymore. I post a lot on LinkedIn. Some would say too much, so connect with me over there. I think Gene linked that in the email that he sent out. But I would love to connect with you guys, and if I can be of any help, let me know.
Brandon, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your experience, and your advice. It's been incredible takeaways here today, and we really appreciate it. Be blessed, my friend.
Appreciate it, Gene. Thanks so much.
Sure enough.